The little pink plus sign stared back at me, a beacon of hope and joy in the sterile bathroom light. I couldn't stop the smile from spreading across my face. After months of trying, Daniel and I were finally going to be parents. I clutched the pregnancy test to my chest, my heart racing with excitement. "Daniel," I called out, rushing down the stairs. "Daniel, I have amazing news." The living room was empty, but I could hear muffled voices coming from the kitchen. As I approached, Daniel's deep laugh mingled with a familiar, shrill cackle that made my stomach drop. No, it couldn't be. I rounded the corner to find my husband and his mother, Evelyn, sitting at our kitchen table, surrounded by moving boxes. "Miranda, there you are," Daniel said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Mom's here." Evelyn's perfectly coiffed silver hair gleamed as she turned to me. Her lips curled in what I'm sure she thought was a welcoming smile. "Miranda, dear, how lovely to see you." I forced a smile, my hand instinctively moving to cover my still flat stomach. "Evelyn, what a surprise! I didn't know you were visiting." Daniel cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "Actually, honey, Mom's not just visiting. She's moving in with us." The world tilted on its axis. "What?" I managed to choke out. "Now, Miranda," Evelyn cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Daniel and I thought it would be best if I was here to help out. You're so busy with your little teaching job, after all." I turned to Daniel, searching his face for any sign that this was all some cruel joke. "When exactly were you planning on telling me about this?" He at least had the decency to look sheepish. "I was going to tell you tonight, sweetheart. It all happened so fast. Mom's lease was up, and well, we have the spare room." "The nursery," I whispered, my hand tightening around the pregnancy test hidden behind my back. "What was that, dear?" Evelyn asked, her eyes narrowing. I straightened my spine, meeting her gaze. "Nothing. Daniel, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" We stepped into the hallway, and I could feel Evelyn's eyes boring into my back. "Daniel, how could you make this decision without talking to me first?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice low. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I once found endearing. "Miranda, she's my mother. What was I supposed to do, let her be homeless?" "That's not the point, and you know it," I said, my frustration mounting. "We're supposed to be partners. We make decisions like this together." I know. "I'm sorry," he said, but his apology felt hollow. "Look, it's just temporary, okay? Until she finds a new place." I wanted to argue further, to tell him about the baby growing inside me, but the words stuck in my throat. This should have been a moment of celebration, not conflict. "Fine," I said, defeated, "but we need to talk about this more later." As we re-entered the kitchen, Evelyn was unpacking a box, filling our cabinets with her gaudy china. "Oh, Miranda," she said, not bothering to look at me, "I hope you don't mind, but I've taken the liberty of rearranging things a bit. This kitchen could use a woman's touch." I bit my tongue, tasting blood. "Actually, Evelyn, I'd prefer if you didn't." "Nonsense, dear," she interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "You'll see, this will be so much better. Now, where do you keep your good silver? The set I saw earlier was rather quaint." I watched in horror as she systematically dismantled the kitchen I had so carefully organized. Daniel stood by, silent and useless, as his mother steamrolled over every protest I attempted to make. As the evening wore on, my joy at the pregnancy faded, replaced by a gnawing dread. How was I supposed to bring a child into this world when I couldn't even control what happened in my own home? Later that night, as I lay in bed next to a snoring Daniel, I placed a hand on my stomach and whispered a quiet promise. "Don't worry, little one. Mommy will figure this out, somehow." The morning sickness hit me like a freight train, sending me rushing to the bathroom. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, heaving into the toilet, I heard Evelyn's voice outside the door. "Miranda, dear, are you all right in there?" I wiped my mouth, struggling to catch my breath. "I'm fine, Evelyn. Just not feeling well." The door creaked open, and Evelyn's perfectly manicured hand appeared, holding a glass of water. "Here, drink this. It'll settle your stomach." I accepted the water gratefully, but as I reached for it, my eyes caught sight of something on the vanity. My driver's license was peeking out from beneath Evelyn's makeup bag. "What's my ID doing here?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Evelyn's eyes widened for a split second before her face smoothed into a mask of innocence. "Oh, I must have accidentally swept it up with my things when I was tidying earlier. Silly me." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As Evelyn left, I quickly checked my wallet. My bank book was missing too. Later that day, I cornered Daniel in his home office. "We need to talk about your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed, not looking up from his computer. "What is it now, Miranda?" "I found my ID in her things, and my bank book is missing. Don't you think that's strange?" Daniel finally met my gaze, his expression a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. "Are you seriously accusing my mother of stealing? She's probably just trying to help organize things." "By taking my personal documents?" I countered, my frustration mounting. "Miranda, you're being paranoid," he said dismissively. "Mom's just trying to help. Maybe you misplaced your bank book." I opened my mouth to argue further, but a wave of nausea washed over me. I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of his desk. Daniel's face softened slightly. "Are you okay? You've been sick a lot lately." This was my chance. I took a deep breath, ready to share the news of my pregnancy, but before I could speak, Evelyn's voice rang out from downstairs. "Daniel, honey, can you come help me with something?" He stood up immediately. "We'll talk later, okay? Try to get some rest." As he left the room, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. How had my life become this? My husband more concerned with his mother's needs than his wife's well-being. That evening, I sat at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate, as Evelyn regaled us with stories of Daniel's childhood. And then little Daniel said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to marry you." Evelyn cackled, reaching out to pinch Daniel's cheek. He laughed along with her, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. "If you'll excuse me," I murmured, standing up. "But you've hardly touched your food," Evelyn said, her voice laced with false concern. "Are you watching your figure, dear? You have been looking a bit puffy lately." I froze, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. "I'm just not feeling well," I managed to say. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of something poking out of Evelyn's purse on the counter. The corner of my bank book was just visible. My heart raced as I approached, casually reaching for a glass of water. In one swift motion, I snatched the bank book and slipped it into my pocket. "Miranda?" Daniel called. "What are you doing?" I turned, forcing a smile. "Just getting some water. I think I'll go lie down." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear Evelyn's voice, low and insistent. "Daniel, I'm worried about Miranda. She's been acting so strange lately. Do you think she might be unstable?" I clutched the railing, my knuckles turning white. This woman was trying to turn my husband against me, and worse, she was succeeding. In the safety of our bedroom, I opened the bank book with shaking hands. My blood ran cold as I saw unfamiliar transactions, large withdrawals I had never made. At that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about Evelyn moving in. This was war, and I was fighting for my marriage, my home, and the future of my unborn child. The smell of bacon wafted up the stairs, turning my stomach. I groaned, pushing myself out of bed. Another day in this house of horrors. As I made my way downstairs, I heard Daniel and Evelyn's voices in the kitchen. "Now, Daniel," Evelyn cooed, "a man needs a hearty breakfast. Miranda should be up making this for you." I paused at the bottom of the stairs, my blood boiling. "Mom, Miranda's been feeling under the weather lately," Daniel replied, his tone apologetic. "Nonsense," Evelyn scoffed. "In my day, we didn't let a little queasiness stop us from taking care of our husbands." I'd heard enough. I stormed into the kitchen, startling them both. "Good morning," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you're discussing my shortcomings as a wife." Daniel at least had the decency to look ashamed. Evelyn, however, merely raised an eyebrow. "Well, if the shoe fits, dear." I turned to Daniel, my patience wearing thin. "And what do you think about this, Daniel? Do you agree that I should be up at the crack of dawn, slaving over a hot stove for you?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Miranda, you know that's not what we meant." "Oh, I think that's exactly what you meant," I snapped. "Well, let me make something clear. I am your wife, not your servant. And you," I turned to Evelyn, "are a guest in our home. It's about time you started acting like one." Evelyn's face turned an alarming shade of red. "How dare you speak to me like that? Daniel, are you going to let her talk to your mother this way?" Daniel looked between us, clearly torn. "Ladies, please, can't we all just get along?" I laughed bitterly. "Get along? Your mother has been undermining me since the moment she moved in, and you've done nothing but enable her." Now, Miranda, Daniel started, his tone patronizing, I think you're overreacting. Mom's just trying to help. Help? I exploded. Is that what you call it? She's taken over our home, criticized everything I do, and now she's trying to turn you against me, and you're letting her. Daniel's face hardened. That's enough, Miranda. I won't have you disrespecting my mother like this. I stared at him, shocked. Your mother? What about your wife? What about our family? What family? Evelyn interjected. All I see is a woman who can't even take care of her husband properly. Something inside me snapped. Oh, I'll show you family, I hissed, my hand moving to my stomach. I'm pregnant, you insufferable witch. The kitchen fell silent. Daniel's jaw dropped and Evelyn's eyes narrowed to slits. Pregnant? Daniel stammered. Why didn't you tell me? I've been trying to, I said, my voice breaking. But you've been too busy catering to your mother's every whim to notice anything about me. Evelyn recovered quickly, her shock morphing into a saccharine smile. Oh, how wonderful, Daniel. You're going to be a father. We must start preparing right away. Miranda, dear, you'll need to cut back on work. A mother's place is in the home, after all. I whirled on her. No, absolutely not. I love my job and I'm not giving it up. But who will take care of the baby? Evelyn pressed. Surely you don't expect Daniel to change diapers and warm bottles? I turned to my husband, praying he'd stand up for me, for us. Daniel? He ran a hand through his hair, looking conflicted. Well, honey, Mom has a point. Someone needs to be home with the baby. In that moment, I saw my future flash before my eyes. Trapped in this house under Evelyn's thumb, with a husband who'd never stand up for me, I couldn't let that happen. No, I said, my voice steady and cold. If that's how you both feel, then things need to change. Now. I grabbed my car keys from the counter. I'm going to work. When I get back, we're going to have a serious conversation about the future of this family. All of us. As I walked out the door, I heard Evelyn's voice behind me. Daniel, we can't let her treat us this way. Something must be done. I slammed the door, my hands shaking. This was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to lose. The weeks following my pregnancy announcement were a blur of tension and exhaustion. My morning sickness had intensified, leaving me drained and weak. Yet Evelyn's demands never ceased, and Daniel's indifference grew more pronounced with each passing day. One evening I stumbled into the kitchen, my head pounding and my stomach churning. The sight that greeted me made my blood boil. Evelyn was at the stove, stirring a pot of what smelled like her infamous beef stew. The very smell that had been making me nauseous for days. Evelyn, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I thought I asked you not to cook that. The smell makes me sick. She turned, her face a mask of innocence. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I must have forgotten. Daniel mentioned he was craving it, and well, a good wife should cater to her husband's needs, don't you think? I gripped the counter, fighting back a wave of nausea. Where is Daniel? Working late again, poor dear. Evelyn cooed. He's been so stressed lately, I wonder why. The implication in her tone was clear. Before I could respond, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Evelyn's eyes widened in mock concern. Oh my, are you all right? Perhaps you should lie down. I'll take care of everything here. I wanted to argue, to stand my ground, but another wave of pain hit me. Defeated, I retreated to the bedroom. Hours later, I woke to raised voices downstairs. Groggy and disoriented, I made my way to the top of the stairs. Daniel, you need to talk some sense into that wife of yours, Evelyn was saying. She's not taking proper care of herself or this house. It's affecting you, I can tell. Mom, please, Daniel sighed. Miranda's pregnant. She's doing her best. Her best, Evelyn scoffed. When I was pregnant with you, I never let it interfere with my duties. That's what's wrong with women today, always making excuses. I'd heard enough. Swallowing my anger, I descended the stairs. Both of them fell silent as I entered the room. Miranda, Daniel started, his tone cautious. How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying your child while being treated like a burden in my own home, I snapped. How do you think I'm feeling? Evelyn clicked her tongue. Now, dear, there's no need for dramatics. We're all just concerned about you. I turned to her, my patience finally snapping. Concerned? You've done nothing but undermine and criticize me since you moved in. And you, I rounded on Daniel, have let her do it. I'm your wife, Daniel. We're having a baby. When are you going to start acting like it? Daniel's face hardened. That's enough, Miranda. Mom's right, you're being dramatic. Maybe if you tried a little harder. Tried harder? I interrupted, my voice rising. I'm growing a human being while working full-time and trying to keep this house running. What exactly would you like me to try harder at? Well, Evelyn interjected, for starters, you could. No, I held up a hand, silencing her. I don't want to hear another word from you. This is between me and my husband. Daniel stood, his face flushed with anger. Don't speak to my mother that way. She's only trying to help. Help, I laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? Daniel, open your eyes. She's tearing us apart, and you're letting her. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but then Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, and his expression hardened once more. I think you need to calm down, he said coldly. Maybe you should go lie down. In that moment, something inside me broke. I looked at the man I had married, the father of my unborn child, and saw a stranger. You're right, I said, my voice eerily calm. I do need to lie down, but not here. I turned and walked out of the room, ignoring their calls behind me. As I climbed the stairs, my mind was made up. I couldn't stay in this house another night. It was time to take care of myself and my baby, even if it meant doing it alone. I stood in our bedroom, my hands shaking as I packed my suitcase. The weight of my decision pressed down on me, but I knew I had no choice. For the sake of my unborn child and my own sanity, I had to leave. As I zipped up the suitcase, the door creaked open. Daniel stood there, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. What are you doing? He demanded. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm leaving, Daniel. I can't stay here anymore. His eyes widened in disbelief. Leaving? But you're pregnant. You can't just leave. I can, and I will, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I'm taking my maternity leave early and going to stay with my parents. Daniel's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous, Miranda. You're overreacting. Mom and I are just trying to help you. I laughed bitterly. Help me? Is that what you call this? Your mother has taken over our home, undermined me at every turn, and you've done nothing but enable her. She's just trying to prepare you for motherhood, Daniel argued. You should be grateful for her experience. Grateful? I spat. For what? For making me feel worthless in my own home? For stealing my personal documents? For turning my husband against me? Daniel's face paled. What are you talking about? Mom would never. Open your eyes, Daniel, I shouted, my frustration finally boiling over. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? And you're letting her destroy our marriage. Just then, Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. What's all this shouting about? It can't be good for the baby. I turned to her, my anger reaching new heights. Don't you dare pretend to care about this baby. You've done nothing but stress me out since you moved in. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I've only been trying to help. If you can't appreciate that, maybe you're not ready to be a mother. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively moving to protect my belly. Daniel stepped between us. Mom, that's enough. Miranda, you need to calm down. This stress isn't good for the baby. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man I married, the one who promised to stand by me through thick and thin, was gone. In his place stood a mama's boy who couldn't see past his mother's manipulations. I am calm, I said, my voice steady, and I'm leaving. I won't subject myself or my child to this toxic environment any longer. I grabbed my suitcase and pushed past them, heading for the stairs. Behind me I could hear Evelyn's voice dripping with false concern. Daniel, you can't let her leave. What will people think? A pregnant woman abandoning her home and husband. I whirled around, fury coursing through me. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm protecting myself and my child from you both. Daniel's face hardened. If you walk out that door, Miranda, don't expect to come back. His words hung in the air, a final ultimatum. I looked at him, searching for any sign of the man I fell in love with, but all I saw was Evelyn's puppet, dancing to her tune. Goodbye, Daniel, I said softly. I hope one day you'll see the truth. With that, I turned and walked out the front door. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, I could hear Evelyn's voice drifting from an open window. Let her go, Daniel. She'll come crawling back when she realizes she can't do this alone. I slammed the car door shut, my resolve strengthening. I'd show them both just how wrong they were. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. My hand rested on my belly, and I whispered a promise to my unborn child. "It's just you and me now, little one, but we're going to be okay. We're going to be more than okay." The contractions hit me like a freight train, jolting me awake in the middle of the night. I gasped, clutching my swollen belly as pain radiated through my body. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for months had finally arrived. "Mom," I called out, my voice strained. "Dad, it's time." My parents burst into the guest room, their faces a mixture of excitement and concern. As another contraction gripped me, I couldn't help but think of Daniel. He should be here, holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. But he wasn't, and that absence felt like a physical ache. The ride to the hospital was a blur of pain and anxiety. Between contractions, I fumbled with my phone, staring at Daniel's number. Should I call him? Did he even deserve to know? My finger hovered over the call button, but another wave of pain made the decision for me. Hours passed in a haze of agony and determination. My mother's steady presence beside me was a comfort, but it wasn't enough to fill the void left by Daniel's absence. As the final pushes approached, I felt a surge of anger and resolve. I would do this on my own. I didn't need him or his overbearing mother. With one last, earth-shattering push, my baby entered the world. The sound of her first cry filled the room, and suddenly, nothing else mattered. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing my daughter on my chest. I looked down at her tiny, perfect face, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Hello, Lily," I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago finally belonging to this beautiful, real person. As I held Lily, marveling at her tiny fingers and button nose, a nurse approached with a clipboard. "Miss Thompson, we need some information for the birth certificate. Father's name?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I hesitated, my mind racing. Did Daniel deserve to be on the birth certificate? After everything that had happened, did he have the right to call himself Lily's father? Before I could answer, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices echoed through the door, and my heart dropped as I recognized one of them. "I demand to see my daughter-in-law and grandchild." Evelyn's shrill voice carried into the room. "Ma'am, please calm down. Only immediate family is allowed at this time." A nurse tried to reason with her. "I am immediate family," Evelyn screeched. The door burst open, and there stood Evelyn, her face red with fury. Behind her, looking sheepish and conflicted, was Daniel. I instinctively tightened my hold on Lily, my body tensing. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice hoarse from hours of labor. Evelyn marched into the room, her eyes fixed on the bundle in my arms. "We're here to see our granddaughter, of course. Daniel, look at her. She has your nose." Daniel stepped forward, his eyes wide as he took in the sight of his daughter. "Miranda, I'm sorry. I should have been here." "You're right, you should have," I said, my voice cold. "But you weren't. You chose your mother over your wife and child." Evelyn scoffed. "Don't be so dramatic, Miranda. We're here now, and that's what matters. Now let me hold my granddaughter." She reached for Lily, and something inside me snapped. "Don't you dare touch her," I hissed, pulling Lily closer. The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Daniel looked between me and his mother, clearly torn. "Miranda, please," he pleaded. "We just want to be a part of her life." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I once loved. But I also saw the man who had let his mother come between us, who had chosen her over me time and time again. "I think you both need to leave," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "Now." Evelyn's face contorted with rage. "You can't keep us from her. We have rights." As she lunged forward, my mother stepped between us, her voice sharp. "That's enough. Get out, both of you, before I call security." As they were ushered out of the room, I looked down at Lily, peacefully oblivious to the drama surrounding her birth. In that moment, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. "Nurse," I called out, my voice firm. "For the birth certificate. No father listed." 3 months after Lily's birth, I stood on the doorstep of what used to be my home, my heart pounding. Lily was nestled against my chest in her carrier, blissfully unaware of the storm we were about to enter. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Daniel opened the door, his eyes widening at the sight of us. "Miranda, you're back." "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. As we stepped inside, the familiar scent of Evelyn's perfume assaulted my senses. The house looked different, colder somehow. Evelyn emerged from the kitchen, her face a mask of false concern. "Oh, Miranda dear, you're looking well," she said, her eyes darting to Lily. "And this must be our little angel." I instinctively tightened my hold on Lily. "She's my daughter, Evelyn, not yours." Daniel cleared his throat. "Let's sit down and talk, shall we?" As we settled in the living room, I couldn't help but notice how out of place I felt in what was once my own home. Daniel sat across from me, while Evelyn hovered nearby, her eyes never leaving Lily. "I've come to collect my things," I said, cutting straight to the chase, "and to discuss our separation." Daniel's face fell. "Miranda, please. Can't we work this out, for Lily's sake?" Before I could respond, Evelyn interjected. "Now, Miranda, let's not be hasty. Family is everything, after all. And little Lily needs her father." I felt my anger rising. Lily has been doing just fine without a father who chose his mother over his wife and child. Daniel flinched at my words. "That's not fair, Miranda. I've been trying to reach out." "Trying?" I scoffed. "A few text messages asking to see Lily doesn't count as trying, Daniel." Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Now listen here, young lady. You can't keep that child from us. We have rights." "Rights?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "What about my rights? My right to feel safe and respected in my own home? My right to raise my daughter without your constant interference?" As if sensing the tension, Lily began to fuss. I stood up to soothe her, and that's when I saw it, my missing bank book peeking out from under a stack of papers on the side table. My blood ran cold. "What is that doing here?" Daniel followed my gaze, his face paling. "Miranda, I can explain." But I was already moving, snatching up the bank book. As I flipped through it, my worst fears were confirmed. Thousands of dollars, withdrawn without my knowledge or consent. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Evelyn stepped forward, her face a picture of innocence. "Now, Miranda, don't jump to conclusions. We were just safeguarding your money." "Safeguarding," I exploded. "You stole from me. Both of you." Daniel stood, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Miranda, please, we can explain everything. We were just trying to—" "To what, Daniel?" I spat. "To control me? To keep me dependent on you?" Evelyn's facade finally cracked. "You ungrateful little—" "That's enough," a new voice boomed from the doorway. We all turned to see Douglas, Daniel's father, standing there, his face a mask of fury. "Dad?" Daniel said, shocked. "What are you doing here?" Douglas strode into the room, his eyes blazing. "I came to see my granddaughter, but it seems I've walked into a crime scene instead." He turned to me, his voice softening. "Miranda, I am so sorry. I had no idea things had gotten this bad." As Douglas's words hung in the air, I felt a strange mix of vindication and despair. The truth was finally out, but at what cost? I looked at Daniel, the man I once loved, now a stranger to me. At Evelyn, her mask of benevolence finally shattered. And at Douglas, an unexpected ally in this mess. With Lily clutched tightly to my chest, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice steady and resolved. "This ends now." The room fell silent as I dialed 911, my hands shaking but my voice steady. Lily, sensing the tension, began to whimper. I bounced her gently, my eyes never leaving Daniel and Evelyn. "Miranda, please," Daniel pleaded, his face ashen. "We can work this out." But it was too late. Years of manipulation, gaslighting, and theft had led to this moment. As I reported the crime to the dispatcher, I watched the reality of the situation dawn on Daniel's face. The police arrived within minutes, their presence filling our once shared home. As they questioned us, the full extent of Evelyn's deceit came to light. Not only had she stolen my bank book and ID, but she had been systematically draining our accounts for months. Daniel's shock seemed genuine, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. He had chosen his mother over me, over our family, time and time again. As the officers led Evelyn away in handcuffs, she turned to Daniel, her face a mask of desperation. "Daniel, darling, you can't let them do this to your mother." I watched, holding my breath, as Daniel stood frozen, torn between the woman who raised him and the family he had helped create. In that moment, I saw the boy he once was, desperate for his mother's approval, and the man he had failed to become. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, turning away from her. Evelyn's shrieks echoed through the house as she was escorted out, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. Douglas stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Miranda, I can't begin to express how sorry I am for all of this. I should have seen what was happening, should have stopped it." I nodded, grateful for his support, but too emotionally drained to speak. As the chaos subsided, I found myself alone with Daniel in what was once our bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a strange mix of pity and resolve. "Yes, Daniel, you have. But not just today. This has been happening for years." He raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I was protecting our family." "No," I said firmly. "You were protecting your mother, at the expense of your wife and child. And now it's time for me to protect Lily and myself." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. "I want a divorce, Daniel, and full custody of Lily." His shoulders slumped, but he didn't argue. "I understand," he said softly. I'll give you whatever you need." As I packed the last of my things, Douglas approached me again. "Miranda, I know I have no right to ask this, but please don't cut us out of Lily's life entirely. She deserves to know her family, flaws and all." I looked at this man, who had remained silent for so long, but had finally found his voice when it mattered most. "We'll see, Douglas. For now, I need time and space to heal." With Lily secured in her car seat and my belongings packed, I stood at the threshold of what was once my home. Daniel and Douglas watched as I prepared to leave, the weight of everything that had transpired hanging heavy in the air. "Goodbye," I said simply, closing the door on that chapter of my life. As I drove away, Lily cooed softly in the back seat. I caught her eye in the rearview mirror and felt a surge of love and determination. "It's just you and me now, little one," I said, my voice strong and clear, "but we're going to be okay. More than okay." The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt free. Free from manipulation, free from doubt, free to be the mother and woman I was meant to be. As the sun set on this tumultuous day, I realized that sometimes the happiest endings come from the courage to write your own story, and that's exactly what Lily and I were going to do. The first thing I noticed when I stepped through the front door was the silence. No welcoming embrace, no warm words of congratulations, just the faint smell of stale beer and takeout. "James?" I called out, my voice echoing through our once cozy home. I shifted baby Ethan in my arms, his tiny face scrunched up in sleep. After 2 weeks at my mother's house recovering from the birth, I'd expected, well, something more than this. The living room was a mess. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table, empty beer cans scattered across the floor. I sighed, feeling the weight of motherhood and housekeeping already pressing down on my shoulders. "In here?" James's gruff voice came from the kitchen. I steeled myself and walked in, hoping to see a hint of the man I'd married. He was slouched at the table, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up as I entered. "Oh, you're back." "Yes, we're home," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "Did you miss us?" James shrugged, his eyes still on his screen. "Sure. How's the kid?" "Ethan," I corrected gently. "His name is Ethan, remember? Would you like to hold him?" Finally, James looked up. His eyes widened, and not in a good way. "Jesus, Alicia, you look different." I felt my cheeks flush. "I just had a baby, James. It takes time for the body to—" Yeah, he waved his hand dismissively. "Just maybe lay off the ice cream for a while." "Huh? You're looking a bit puffy." The words hit me like a slap. I clutched Ethan closer, as if to shield him from his father's callousness. "I can't believe you just said that." James stood up, stretching lazily. "What? I'm just being honest. You asked me if I missed you, and honestly, I missed the old Alicia, the hot one." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm still me, James. I'm just adjusting." He snorted, grabbing another beer from the fridge. "Yeah, well, adjust faster. I didn't sign up for a mom bod." The room seemed to spin around me. Was this really happening? Was this the man I'd chosen to father my child? "I'm going to put Ethan down for a nap," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you could clean up a bit while I'm gone?" James just grunted, already back to his phone. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a mountain. When I reached the nursery, pristine and untouched since I'd left for the hospital, I finally let the tears fall. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, gently laying him in his crib. "I'm so sorry. I thought your daddy would be different." As I stood there watching my perfect little boy sleep, a strange feeling began to creep over me. It wasn't just sadness or disappointment. It was something darker, something I'd never felt before. Rage. How dare he? How dare James treat me like this after everything I'd been through? The sleepless nights, the pain, the fear. All to bring his son into the world. And this was how he repaid me? I clenched my fists, a plan already forming in my mind. If James wanted the old Alicia back, he'd get her, but not in the way he expected. "I promise you, Ethan," I whispered fiercely, "Mommy's going to fix this, and Daddy, he's going to regret ever taking us for granted." As if in response, Ethan's tiny hand reached out, grasping my finger. In that moment, I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about us, and I would do whatever it took to protect my son from a father who clearly didn't deserve him. The game was on, and James had no idea what was coming. I never thought I'd dread the sound of my own husband coming home, but here I was, tensing up at the jangle of keys in the lock. Ethan squirmed in my arms, sensing my anxiety. "Honey, I'm home," James called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I heard the thud of his briefcase hitting the floor, followed by the familiar hiss of a beer can opening. "In the nursery," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. I just finished changing Ethan and was about to put him down for a nap. Heavy footsteps approached, and James appeared in the doorway, beer in hand. His eyes raked over me, and I felt myself shrink under his gaze. "Still wearing those maternity clothes, huh?" he said, taking a swig. "You know, most women are back in shape by now." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. "James, it's only been 6 weeks. The doctor said," he mimicked. "I'm starting to think you're using that as an excuse. Maybe you just like being fat." The words stung, but I forced myself to take a deep breath. "Can we not do this in front of Ethan?" James rolled his eyes. "He's a baby. He doesn't understand anything." He peered at Ethan, his lip curling slightly. "Though I gotta say, he's not exactly a looker, is he? Must take after your side of the family." Something snapped inside me. "That's enough!" I hissed, careful not to raise my voice too much. "He's perfect, and if you can't see that, then maybe you need to take a good, that hard look at yourself." For a moment, James looked taken aback. Then his face hardened. "Watch your tone, Alicia. I'm the one bringing home the bacon around here. The least you could do is try to look good for me." I placed Ethan in his crib, my hands shaking with anger. "And what exactly have you done to help since we brought him home? Have you changed a single diaper? Gotten up for a night feeding? Hell, have you even picked up after yourself?" James' face flushed red. "That's woman's work. I didn't become a father to play housemaid." "No," I spat. "You became a father to criticize and belittle your wife and son. Well done, James. Father of the Year material right here." He took a menacing step towards me, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he drained his beer and tossed the can on the floor. "Clean that up," he growled. "And while you're at it, maybe think about hitting the gym. I'm not asking for much, just for my wife to look like my wife again." With that, he stormed out, leaving me trembling in his wake. I heard the TV blare to life downstairs, some inane sports commentary filling the house. I sank to the floor, tears finally spilling over. How had it come to this? The man I married, the one who had held my hand through labor and promised to love me forever, where was he? A soft coo from the crib caught my attention. I looked up to see Ethan watching me, his tiny face a picture of innocence. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I stood up, wiping my eyes. "No more," I whispered to Ethan. "Mommy's done being a punching bag." I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Mom?" I said when she answered. "I need your help with something." As I outlined my plan to Barbara, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. James wanted the old Alicia back? Fine. But he'd soon learn that you should be careful what you wish for. "Are you sure about this, honey?" Mom asked, concern evident in her voice. I looked at Ethan, peacefully drifting off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied. "It's time for a change. And James? He won't know what hit him." As I hung up, I heard James shouting from downstairs, demanding dinner. I squared my shoulders, a grim smile playing on my lips. Let him yell. His days of calling the shots were numbered. The game was changing, and I was about to become a player he never saw coming. The acrid smell of whiskey hit me before I even opened the front door. My stomach clenched, knowing what awaited me inside. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the storm. "James?" I called out, stepping into our dimly lit living room. Empty bottles littered the coffee table, and the TV blared some mindless reality show. A grunt from the couch was my only answer. I found James sprawled there, eyes glazed, another half-empty bottle dangling from his fingers. "You're home early," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Rough day at work?" He snorted, taking another swig. "What do you care? Too busy with your precious baby to give a damn about me." I bit back a retort. Engaging him when he was like this never ended well. "I'm going to check on Ethan," I said, turning towards the stairs. "Oh yeah, run to your little brat," James slurred, his words dripping with venom. "God knows he needs all the attention he can get. Might grow up to look halfway decent if you hover enough." I froze, my hand on the banister. "What did you just say?" James hauled himself up, swaying slightly. "You heard me. Kid's as ugly as sin. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, huh?" Something snapped inside me. All the pent-up anger, hurt, and frustration of the past months came rushing to the surface. "How dare you?" I hissed, advancing on him. "How dare you speak about our son that way?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Our son, please. I'm starting to wonder if he's even mine. Gus, maybe you've been fooling around, huh? Found someone who doesn't mind your fat ass?" The slap echoed through the room before I even realized I'd raised my hand. James stumbled back, shock momentarily replacing the drunken haze in his eyes. "You bitch," he snarled, rubbing his cheek. "You'll pay for that." Fear gripped me as he lunged forward, but years of resentment gave me strength. I sidestepped his clumsy attack, sending him crashing into the coffee table. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice ringing with an authority I didn't know I possessed. "I've had enough of your abuse, James. This ends now." He struggled to his feet, glass crunching under his shoes. "You think you can stand up to me? You're nothing without me, Alicia. Nothing." A baby's cry pierced the air, snapping us both out of our rage. I turned and raced up the stairs, heart pounding. Behind me, I heard James stumbling after me, his curses following me like a toxic cloud. I burst into the nursery, scooping Ethan into my arms. "Shh, baby, it's okay," I murmured, even as my own tears threatened to fall. "Mommy's here." James appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of drunken fury. "Put him down," he growled. "This is between us." I clutched Ethan tighter, backing away. "Stay back, James. I mean it." He took a menacing step forward. "Or what? You'll slap me again? Go ahead. Give me a reason." In that moment, looking into the eyes of the man I once loved, now twisted by alcohol and hate, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Ethan, about giving him the life he deserved. "No," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I won't give you anything. Not anymore." I reached for my phone with my free hand, never taking my eyes off James. "I'm calling the police," I told him, "and then I'm leaving. For good." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or a moment of clarity. But it was quickly swallowed by rage. "You wouldn't dare," he snarled. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Watch me." As I dialed 911, a strange calm settled over me. This was it, the point of no return. But as I held Ethan close, feeling his tiny heart beating against mine, I knew I was making the right choice. The game had changed, and this time I was playing for keeps. The gym locker room echoed with the sound of my labored breathing as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. 3 months had passed since that fateful night when I'd finally stood up to James. Now, here I was, drenched in sweat, my muscles aching, but a fire burning in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "You're killing it, Alicia," Sarah, my personal trainer, said as she poked her head into the locker room. "Same time tomorrow?" I nodded, managing a smile. Wouldn't miss it for the world. As Sarah left, I allowed myself a moment of pride. The woman in the mirror was changing, not just physically but mentally. The soft, pliable Alicia who'd let James walk all over her was fading away, replaced by someone stronger, fiercer. Back home, I found my mother, Barbara, playing with Ethan on the living room floor. She'd been my rock these past months, moving in to help with Ethan while I focused on rebuilding myself. "How was the gym, sweetheart?" she asked, scooping up Ethan as I bent to kiss his forehead. "Brutal," I admitted, "but in a good way. I feel alive." Barbara's eyes crinkled with a mixture of pride and concern. And James? Any word? I shook my head. After that night, James had moved out, alternating between begging for forgiveness and hurling threats. But I'd held firm, focusing on myself and Ethan. His lawyer called again, I said, sinking onto the couch. They're pushing for joint custody. Barbara's face hardened. Over my dead body. After what he did. I know, Mom, I interrupted gently, but the court doesn't see it that way, without concrete evidence of abuse. The words hung heavy in the air. We both knew what was at stake. If James got joint custody, all my efforts to protect Ethan could be undone. As if sensing the tension, Ethan began to fuss. I took him from Barbara, breathing in his sweet baby scent. "It's okay, little man," I murmured. "Mommy's got you." Later that night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat at the kitchen table poring over legal documents. The custody battle loomed, a dark cloud on the horizon of my newfound strength. A text message lit up my phone. "James, miss me yet? You can't keep my son from me forever. I'll see you in court, bitch." My hands shook as I set the phone down. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he still thought he had the upper hand. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about getting back at James anymore. This was about protecting Ethan, about breaking the cycle of abuse before it could touch my son. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Alicia? It's late. Is everything okay?" "Detective Rodriguez," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Remember when you said to call if I ever wanted to press charges? I'm ready." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you sure about this, Alicia? Once we start, there's no going back." I looked at the baby monitor, watching Ethan's peaceful, sleeping face. Then my eyes drifted to the mirror in the hallway, catching my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't a victim anymore. She was a fighter. "I'm sure," I said firmly. "It's time James faced the consequences of his actions, and I'm going to make damn sure he never hurts us again." As I hung up, a mix of fear and determination coursed through me. The path ahead would be hard, but I was ready. James wanted a fight. He was about to get one he'd never see coming. The game had changed, and this time I was playing for keeps. For Ethan. For myself. And for every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. Watch out, James. The new Alicia is coming for you, and she's not holding back. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at me. 6 months of grueling workouts, strict dieting, and sheer determination had transformed my body. The soft, postpartum curves James had so cruelly mocked were replaced by lean muscle and renewed confidence. "Alicia?" Mom called from downstairs. "James is here for his visitation with Ethan." My stomach clenched. Despite the restraining order, the court had granted James supervised visits. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my form-fitting workout clothes. Time to face the music. As I descended the stairs, I heard James's voice, thick with false charm. "There's my big boy, come to Daddy." I rounded the corner to find James, looking disheveled and slightly bloated, awkwardly holding Ethan. His eyes widened as they landed on me, a flicker of something, shock, desire, crossing his face before he masked it with a sneer. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look who finally decided to take care of herself." I bit back a retort, focusing instead on Ethan. "Hey, sweetie, Mommy's right here if you need me, okay?" James scoffed. "He doesn't need you hovering. Do you, champ?" He bounced Ethan roughly, causing him to whimper. "Careful," I snapped, instinctively reaching for my son. James pulled away, his eyes narrowing. "Back off. It's my time with him." The tension in the room was palpable. Mom stepped in, ever the peacekeeper. "Why don't we all sit down? I've made some snacks." As we moved to the living room, I couldn't help but notice James's labored breathing, the way his shirt strained against his expanding waistline. My secret weapon, weekly deliveries of high-calorie, irresistible treats to his apartment, was clearly working. James plopped onto the couch, immediately reaching for the plate of cookies. "At least someone in this house knows how to treat a guest," he mumbled through a mouthful of crumbs. I perched on the edge of an armchair, watching him like a hawk as he interacted with Ethan. Despite his bravado, it was clear he had no idea how to handle a baby. "So," James said, eyeing me over Ethan's head, "you've been busy, huh? Trying to relive your glory days?" I met his gaze steadily. I've been taking care of myself, something you might want to consider. His face flushed red. Watch it, Alicia. Don't forget who made you who you are. Oh, I haven't forgotten, I replied, my voice low and dangerous. I remember everything. The air crackled with unspoken threats. Ethan, sensing the tension, began to cry. James looked panicked, holding him at arm's length. Here, I said, standing up. Let me. I said back off, James snapped, jerking away. In his haste, he lost his grip on Ethan. Time seemed to slow down. I lunged forward, my heart in my throat, as Ethan slipped from James's grasp. By some miracle, I managed to catch him just before he hit the floor. Oh my God, Mom gasped, rushing to our side. I clutched Ethan to my chest, my whole body shaking. James stood frozen, his face ashen. I didn't mean to, he stammered. White-hot rage coursed through me. Get out, I hissed. Get out now. Alicia, please, it was an accident. An accident, I exploded. You could have seriously hurt him. This ends now, James. No more visits, no more chances. I'm calling my lawyer, and I'm going for full custody. James's face contorted with fury. You can't do that. He's my son, too. A son you just dropped, I shouted back. Leave, James, before I call the police. For a moment I thought he might lunge at me, but then, deflating like a punctured balloon, he turned and stomped out, slamming the door behind him. As the echo faded, I sank to the floor, still cradling Ethan. Mom knelt beside us, her hand on my shoulder. Are you okay, sweetheart? She asked softly. I looked down at Ethan, his tiny fingers curled around mine, his eyes wide with trust. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting my child, no matter the cost. No, I said, my voice steady despite the tears, threatening to fall. But I will be. We both will be. As I held my son close, a steely resolve settled over me. James had no idea what was coming, but he was about to find out just how far a mother would go to protect her child. Mommy, do I have to go? Ethan's small voice quivered as I helped him into his coat. My heart clenched, but I forced a smile. It's just for the weekend, sweetie. Remember what we talked about? Daddy misses you. 4 years had passed since that fateful day when James nearly dropped Ethan. Despite my best efforts, the court had recently granted James unsupervised weekend visits. The thought of Ethan alone with him made my stomach churn. A car horn blared outside. James, impatient as ever. Come on, champ! James called from the driveway, his voice overly cheerful. We've got a big weekend planned. I walked Ethan out, my grip on his hand perhaps a little too tight. James stood by his car, a far cry from the fit man I'd married. Years of my special deliveries and his own neglect had taken their toll. He was easily 100 pounds heavier, his once chiseled face now puffy and red. Hey, big guy! James scooped Ethan up, grunting with the effort. Ready for some man time? Ethan nodded hesitantly, looking back at me. I swallowed hard, pushing down the urge to snatch him back. Be good for Daddy, okay? I said, kissing his forehead. Then, to James, my voice low and steely, remember, he has swimming lessons tomorrow at 10. Don't be late. James rolled his eyes. Relax, Alicia. I've got this. Maybe if you weren't so busy at that gym of yours, you'd trust me more. I bit back a retort. My job at the fitness club had been a godsend, not just financially, but for my sanity. Plus, it gave me access to resources I needed for the next phase of my plan. As they drove away, I felt a familiar mix of anger and fear bubbling up. I needed to channel it, to stay focused. I headed to the gym, throwing myself into a punishing workout. Hours later, drenched in sweat and pleasantly sore, I checked my phone. No messages from James. I tried not to worry. He wouldn't dare mess this up, not when he was finally getting what he wanted. Sunday afternoon arrived with agonizing slowness. I paced the living room, checking the clock every few minutes. They were late. Very late. Just as I was about to call, I heard a car door slam. I rushed outside to find James struggling to get Ethan out of the car seat. What happened? I demanded, taking in Ethan's tear-stained face and James' disheveled appearance. Nothing, James snapped. Traffic was bad. But as Ethan ran to me, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A small angry bruise on his arm. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice calm. But how did you get this bruise? Before he could answer, James cut in. He fell at the park. Kids, you know. Always getting into scrapes. Ethan looked up at me, his eyes wide and fearful. In that moment, I knew James was lying. Go inside, sweetie, I said softly. Grandma's waiting with a surprise. As soon as Ethan was out of earshot, I rounded on James. What really happened? James's face darkened. I told you he fell. Are you calling me a liar? Wouldn't be the first time, I shot back. If I find out you laid a hand on him, you'll what? James sneered, stepping closer. Face it, Alicia, you've got nothing on me. The court sees what I want them to see, a loving father who deserves time with his son. For a moment I saw red. All the pain, all the humiliation he'd put me through over the years came rushing back, but then something shifted. A calm, cold determination settled over me. You're right, James, I said, my voice steady. The court sees what you want them to see, for now. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled, a predator's smile. You'll find out soon enough. Enjoy your visitations while you can. As I turned to go inside, James called out, his voice tinged with uncertainty. You can't take him from me, Alicia. He's my son, too. I paused at the door, looking back at the pathetic, bloated shell of the man I once loved. Watch me, I said softly, and closed the door on his stunned face. Inside, I hugged Ethan close, my mind racing. The final phase of my plan was set. James had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn a very painful lesson. The game was almost over, and I was holding all the cards. The quaint bell above the cafe door chimed as I stepped inside, my heart pounding beneath my carefully chosen outfit. James's parents, John and Kathy, looked up from behind the counter, their smiles faltering as they took in my transformed appearance. Alicia, Kathy gasped, is that really you? I smiled, a predator's grin. In the flesh. Thanks for agreeing to this little family gathering. John's eyes narrowed. James said you had something important to discuss. He's on his way. As if on cue, the bell chimed again. James lumbered in, his face flushed from the short walk from the parking lot. He froze when he saw me, his jaw dropping comically. What the hell is this? He sputtered. I turned to face him, relishing the shock in his eyes. Hello, James. So glad you could join us. Kathy, ever the peacemaker, gestured to a table. Why don't we all sit down? I've prepared some refreshments. As we settled in, the tension was palpable. James couldn't take his eyes off me, a mix of desire and anger clouding his features. His parents exchanged worried glances. Where's Ethan? James demanded. Safe with my mother, I replied coolly. This conversation isn't for children's ears. John leaned forward. Alicia, what's going on? You said this was urgent. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It is. I'm here to talk about James, about the kind of man your son really is. James's face darkened. Watch it, Alicia, he growled, but I was done being silenced. For years, I continued, my voice steady, James has been emotionally and verbally abusive. He's belittled me, mocked my appearance after giving birth to his child, and neglected his duties as a father. Kathy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. John's brow furrowed in disbelief. That's ridiculous, James scoffed. Don't listen to her. She's clearly lost her mind. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over the play button. Would you like to hear it for yourself? The color drained from James's face as I played the recordings. His cruel words, his drunken rants, the sound of objects being thrown, all preserved in damning clarity. My God, John whispered, his face ashen. Kathy reached for James's hand. Sweetheart, is this true? James jerked away, his eyes wild. She set me up. She's been planning this all along. I met his gaze, unflinching. You're right, James. I have been planning to free myself and our son from your toxicity. I turned to his parents, my voice softening. There's more. Last weekend, Ethan came home with bruises. James claims he fell, but... You bitch. James roared, lunging across the table. His meaty hands closed around my throat, knocking us both to the ground. For a moment, panic seized me. Then years of training kicked in. I brought my knee up sharply, connecting with his soft underbelly. As he wheezed, I twisted, breaking his grip and pinning him to the floor. That's enough! John's voice boomed as he and Kathy pulled us apart. I stood, straightening my clothes, my composure intact. James sprawled on the floor, red-faced and panting. I'm pressing charges, I said calmly, for assault and for what he did to Ethan. I have photographs, medical reports, everything. Kathy sobbed quietly, while John looked at his son with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. James, he said, his voice heavy, is this who you've become? James struggled to his feet, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. You can't do this, he wheezed. I'll lose everything. I met his gaze, years of pain and anger crystallizing into cold determination. You should have thought of that before you laid a hand on our son." As James crumpled, the fight finally leaving him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There would be court dates, custody hearings, and no doubt more of James's desperate attempts to maintain control. But standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I'd once known, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The old Alicia was gone. In her place stood a warrior, a protector, a survivor, and God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. The courtroom fell silent as I approached the stand, my heels clicking against the polished floor. James sat at the defendant's table, a shadow of his former self, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw a flicker of the old arrogance there, quickly replaced by fear. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge said, "you may begin your testimony." I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the thick folder of evidence I'd compiled over the years. "Your Honor, I'm here today not just as James Henderson's soon-to-be ex-wife, but as a survivor of years of emotional and physical abuse." For the next hour, I laid bare the ugly truth of my marriage, the cruel taunts about my postpartum body, the neglect of our son, the escalating aggression that culminated in Ethan's bruises. With each revelation, I felt lighter, as if shedding the weight of secrets I'd carried for too long. James's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, a scorned woman out for revenge. But the evidence spoke for itself, the recordings, the photographs, the medical reports. Even James's parents, sitting stiffly in the gallery, couldn't meet my eyes. As I finished my testimony, the judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Henderson, given everything you've endured, what do you hope to achieve here today?" I straightened my shoulders, my voice steady. "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice and for protection. I want full custody of my son, and I want James to get the help he clearly needs." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. James's face contorted with rage, but a warning look from his lawyer silenced him. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "And the divorce papers you've submitted?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Those are long overdue, Your Honor." As I returned to my seat, I caught sight of my mother in the audience, tears streaming down her face. She mouthed, "I'm so proud of you," and I felt a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. The rest of the proceedings passed in a blur. When the judge finally delivered her verdict granting me full custody and approving the divorce, I felt a curious mix of elation and exhaustion. James, his face ashen, was led away in handcuffs to await sentencing for child endangerment. As he passed me, he leaned in and hissed, "This isn't over, Alicia." I met his gaze calmly. "Yes, James, it is." Outside the courthouse, surrounded by a flurry of reporters, I spotted John and Kathy hovering uncertainly at the edge of the crowd. I made my way over to them, my heart heavy but resolute. "Alicia," Kathy began, her voice trembling, We had no idea, all those years." John cut in, his face lined with shame. "We failed you, and we failed our grandson. Can you ever forgive us?" I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. "It's not about forgiveness right now. It's about moving forward. Ethan will need his grandparents in his life. If you're willing to be there for him, really be there, then we can work on rebuilding." They nodded eagerly, tears in their eyes. As they walked away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My mother appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around me. "Ready to go home, sweetheart?" Home. The word held new meaning now. Not a battleground, not a prison, but a sanctuary for me and my son. "More than ready," I replied, smiling. As we drove away, leaving the courthouse and the remnants of my old life behind, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Single motherhood, healing from trauma, rebuilding my life. But for the first time in years, I was excited for the future. The woman who had entered that courtroom was not the same one leaving it. I was stronger now, wiser, unbreakable. James had tried to diminish me, to break my spirit, but in the end, he'd only fueled my transformation. I thought of Ethan waiting for me at home and smiled. We had a whole new life ahead of us, full of love, laughter, and endless possibilities. The game was over, and this time we had both won.